Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating a spring egg decor piece. For my project, I'm going to be using half of a paper mache egg that I got from Kmart Australia a few years ago and this little plastic candlestick that I got from Amazon. I'm going to be attaching the two of these pieces together using Gorilla Super Glue Gel. I'll also be adding some hot glue to help with that immediate hold. I'm adding a bead of glue around the top rim of the candlestick, and then I'm going to position my half egg piece in the center. There's obviously not as much to sort of position, so I did have to have it angled a little bit, but overall it stuck pretty easily. But as I said, I did add a few beads of hot glue to help it hold immediately. When that glue was dry, I used Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I'm going to be applying 2 coats to the entire project, so the egg and my little plastic candlestick holder. This is going to give me a really great surface for my paint, but it's also going to help with adhesion. The little candlestick that I have, as I said, was plastic, so I definitely need a primer there so that my paint will stick and stay there. So I ended up applying 1 coat of the primer. I let that dry for about half an hour, and then I applied a second coat and I gave that a good amount of wait time. I then took out Paint Couture's Italian Ivory mineral paint, and I'm going to be painting the inside of the egg, and I ended up painting the outside as well. I wasn't 100% sure what color I was going to be using on the outside, so I just decided to go ahead and give it a coat of the Italian Ivory anyway. I did actually end up doing 2 coats of the Italian Ivory on the inside though. Now this does have a built-in top coat, so it did save me a step. I then took out Redesign's Blossoming Spring Mould. I love this mold. I haven't had a chance to use it just yet, but I love those little birds. I think it's perfect for spring and Easter decor. And I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Rapid Casting Resin. First though, I'm going to add some glue to part of the mold because I don't want to cast the bird on the left. I just want the bird on the right hand side, so that glue is going to act as sort of like a little dam. I'm then going to grab out my rapid casting resin. I'm going to pour out equal amounts, step 1 and step 2 together, and then I'm going to stir it really well for at least 30 seconds. I'm mixing up my resin in a silicone cup. I find that the easiest to use. It's the easiest to clean and to control the pouring of the resin. I sort of just squeeze the sides together. So I'm just going to begin to pour that resin into the mold. At this point, I wasn't 100% sure of what other pieces I might need, so I did end up casting the flowers and the branch as well, just to make sure that I had all the pieces I needed and to use up all of that resin. I'll then let this set for about 10 minutes. Next, I took out Redesign's Claire mold, and I really loved the ornate details of that design on the right hand side, so I mixed up some more resin. I'm stirring it really well, and then I will be pouring resin into that larger design. And as I said before, it only takes about 10 minutes for Paint Couture's rapid casting resin to set up, and it will be white when it is ready to come out of that mold. Keep in mind that this rapid casting resin also comes in black. Next, it was time to take my bird mold out, so I'm going to start taking those castings out of there. Now, they are pretty fresh, so they will be flexible to start off with. So if you need to have your castings wrap around anything, I definitely suggest that you do that not long after you take your pieces out. However, I am going to be using that little bird piece on the front section of my egg. I'm then going to be having a little look at the egg itself and working out exactly what I want to do. So I knew I wanted the bird sitting at the front, but I knew I also wanted florals. So this is Botanical Paradise by Redesign. This is a 3-page transfer full of beautiful florals. There's also some butterflies and bees. I wanted to go with a blue and cream theme, so I'm going to cut out a couple of different flowers that I think will suit that theme, but will also fit in the egg and be the right scale. I think it would look odd to have florals that were really large in the back of the egg when I have the delicate bird from the Blossoming Spring mold. So I'm just working out here how much I'll actually be able to fit in there. So I'm loving these two. Next, I decided that I would take out the Claire casting, and I am actually going to be cutting the bottom scroll designs away from the center design. Unfortunately, I didn't quite catch that on the camera, which was disappointing, but that is something that I do in a little bit. Here I'm just working out how it's going to sit on there, and between this and this point, as I said, I cut the scrolls away from the center design that I now have pushed into the egg itself. So I apologize, the camera wasn't on for that, but I think you can see here how I have manipulated that resin, and I'm just gluing it around the edge of my egg using hot glue. And this is still pretty fresh out of the mold, so it is still very flexible. If you are having trouble, you could use a hairdryer to heat up your castings a little bit more, but I'm not having any trouble manipulating this resin here, and I'm just loving how this is looking. I think it's the perfect shape. It looks very regal, and I'm going to just continue to add little beads of glue here and there to make sure that I have my casting stuck down really well. So this is just that Claire mold. I just separated the bottom section from the I'm not even sure what you would call that, but the detail in the center, almost like an upside down fleur-de-lis. Next, I went in and started cutting the top section off that Redesign transfer. It wasn't quite going to fit, so I will reposition it later, but I'm just working out here how these are going to be positioned. I am realizing I'm going to have to trim off some of the bottom of this one as well. I will put that to one side. I may end up using that on a later craft. And again here, just working out the positioning. I've also cut out some text that was in that same transfer, and again here I'm just working out where the bird is going to sit. But that will be the last thing I do, is to attach that bird, because there's a lot we need to do inside the egg. So once I'm happy with how that's looking, I'm going to peel the backing off that transfer for the right hand side. I'm then going to position it on the inside, and once I'm happy with how that's looking, I am going to begin rubbing that transfer down. I will end up not having that piece that's sort of overlapping with the mold. I do end up making sure that that does not go on the mold. I will reposition that one as well. So I'm just rubbing that down. My paint does have a built-in sealer, remember, so the transfer is going on really easily. And I'm then going to pick up a part of the plastic and start pulling that away. I then repositioned that part of the transfer that I didn't rub down, and I'm going to have that on the right hand side. So just repeating that same step, rubbing that down until I have that image transferred. Next, I'm going to peel the backing off that other transfer and put that in position on the left hand side. As I mentioned previously, I have cut out the text that comes with that same transfer, and I'm going to be positioning that in the center over the top of the other transfers. To give the castings around the outside of the egg some more stability, I did go back in with my hot glue gun. I'm going to add some more glue to the back where the castings meet the egg. As I said, just to provide more stability and make sure they are really secure. I then went in and added that extra little piece of transfer that I cut off the design on the left hand side. This is just going to help to fill in some of those gaps. And then I went in with Paint Couture's Extreme Garden Satin. I'm going to do 3 coats of this. I am doing that so that I have that really well sealed. I'm going to be using Fine Line Crackle a little bit later, and I don't want that to crack my transfer. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Pacific Pearl chalk paint. I'm going to be pouring some of that out into an empty paint container, and then I'm going to be adding some Saltwash texture additive to that. This is going to thicken up my paint, and it's going to allow me to create some really fun texture. It's going to give it quite a vintage look, which is perfect for the look I'm going for. So I'm stirring that really well, and then I'm using a chip brush to apply that. I'm starting with the area where I added the extra glue, glow around the back part of the egg. I'm adding that to hide that, and I'm also going up onto my castings. I don't want them to look like resin or plastic, so this is going to give them more of a almost stone type of finish. So I'm dabbing and stippling that product on, and I'm going to be applying that to the back of all the castings first, and I'm also going to be adding it over the rest of the egg and the candlestick holder base that we have as well. So applying it in that dabbing and stippling motion, and then when that is close to being dry, I did end up going back and brushing down the peaks just with the same brush, no extra product, and that just sort of toned down the peaks that we created. I then moved on to adding that same Saltwash mixture to the castings on the front. As I said previous, I want them to have more of an old world finish and less plastic looking. So this is going to give them more of that stone effect. So just dabbing and stippling that over the surface. If I get any on my background, I can use a wet wipe to wipe that back. So I'm just going in and brushing down those peaks, as I mentioned I would be doing earlier, and I will be making sure that I've got a good amount of that product on the base as well. When that was dry, I took out Pentart's Fine Line Crackle Varnish Step 1. I'm going to be applying that just to the inside part of the egg. I'm laying down that first coat. You'll see that it's like white and cloudy. You'll know that it's dry and ready to go when it turns clear again. So I'm just applying a layer of that. Remember, I have sealed my transfers already. Once that was completely dry, I came in with step 2, and I'm applying it in the same areas where I put step 1. I did end up drying step 2 with a hairdryer, as I find that I tend to get some really good cracks when I do this, and it does definitely help me to make sure that I have that completely dry before I move on to the next step. I then took out Paint Couture's Aged Cafe Perfect Pigments. I'm going to be using this instead of using an antiquing wax. I'm going to get some of it on my brush, and then I'm going to start working it into the cracks that have formed thanks to that fine line crackle. So I'm really working that pigment into the cracks, really helping it find all of those details. And if I get too much in one area, I'm switching between using a paper towel and also a wet wipe sometimes, just really sparingly to remove any of the huge excess if I get a big buildup. To seal the pigments and the crackle, I'm going to be using my White Night Gloss Clear Coat. While that was drying, I turned my attention back to the little bird casting. I'm going to be adding the Saltwash mixture over the top of that in a dabbing and stippling motion. I want this obviously to tie in with the rest of the piece and to give it more of that old world look. I then took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to be working in small sections to apply the glaze, really working them into the details of those castings, and then I'm using a wet wipe to pull that back. I don't want it to be too dark, but I do want it to bring out the definition of these beautiful castings. And as I said, I'm working in sections because I am working over the top of a chalk paint, and I want to make sure that it doesn't soak in too quickly before I can remove the amount that I want. At times, I'm also using my water mister to dilute the glaze as well. This is going to help me to move any of the product that is starting to set up. If I inspire you to try any of the Redesign or Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate links. You will find them in the description below. I just get a little thank you in return. Once I was happy with how the front was looking, I then started adding the glaze to the back section. As I said previously, I like to use a water mister to help dilute the product and also to help move it, but I am working in smaller sections, and I'm loving how the glaze is catching the texture that we created using that Saltwash texture additive. I'll come back and add the glaze to the base later. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Abyss chalk paint, and I'm going to be adding it just to some of the little flowers that are on the castings from the Claire Redesign mold. Now, I love the blue that we have going on with the florals in the center, and I really wanted to be able to tie the castings around the outside in with the center part. So I'm going to continue to add that Abyss chalk paint over the top of those flowers. I'm not going for full coverage. I'm going to be wiping some of that back a little bit later on. And I'm also going to be adding it to the bird as well. Now, I did end up forgetting to add the glaze first. So at this point I went, whoops, and went back in and added the glaze to the bird in the sections that didn't have the paint already. So I did get a little bit ahead of myself, but as you can see, I'm adding the glaze. I like to do this to have that in the low points first, and then I'm going in and adding that Abyss chalk paint to the flowers on the bird casting as well. I let that dry and then took out Paint Couture's Angel Eyes mineral paint. I'm going to be going in and layering that over the top of the Abyss chalk paint that we already have down. I am also going to be adding that to the flowers on the bird casting as well. And then once I have finished doing that, I did then decide that I was going to add some of that Angel Eyes to a couple of the other florals on the castings around the outside as well. I let my paint dry up a little bit and then went in with a wet wipe and started to pull back some of that product, creating that distressed, worn look. I then took out Paint Couture's Basil chalk paint. I'm going to be using this over the top of the leaves on the bird casting and on a couple of the leaves that are on the castings around the outside of the egg as well. Just like I did on the other florals, I am going to use a wet wipe to pull back some of the excess and to create that weathered and worn look. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Lux Metallic, and I'm going to be going over the top of the beautiful scroll details of that Claire mold. Again, I'm not going for full coverage here, and I did end up only doing one coat. If you've been watching me for a while, you'll know that I do love more of a vintage worn look. I love using glaze. However, this is definitely a project that you could create with more neutral tones. You could definitely leave out the glazing step that I did to the castings first. You could go with lighter colors. You could leave this bronze step out. But personally, I do love it, and I think it definitely looks very regal. But again, you can leave out those steps and just go with a more neutral palette. In addition to adding it to the scroll details, I'm also adding that bronze to the center of the flowers. To soften the look and also lighten it up a little bit, I'm going to get some of that Pacific Pearl on a paintbrush. I'm going to offload it, and then I'm going to go in and do some dry brushing over the top of all of those casting details. So I'm going in really light. It's catching the high points of the castings, and as I said, it's going to soften that look and brighten it up a little bit more as well. Next, I went in and started adding the glaze to the base. Now that we're getting close to being finished, I can use that glaze down there. I don't have to hold on to that at this point, so I'm going in and adding that glaze sparingly. I'm not going in too heavy. Next, I decided I wanted to add in some natural elements, so I'm going to add this little nest here that I had in my stash, but it's a little bit small, so I'm actually going to pull it apart a little bit so that it appears a bit bigger. And I'm just sort of gently pulling it. I don't want to destroy it, I just want it to be a little bit looser. And then when I'm happy with how that's looking, I'm going to start adding some glue inside the base of my egg. I'm adding dabs of glue in the base where I think that the egg is going to sit. I do have to have it sitting up a little bit higher as I'm going to have the bird in the front, and I want to be able to still see part of that bird's nest over the top of the bird. So I'm just going to press that into place. And then for my eggs, I'm going to roll up some Das air dry clay into little egg shaped balls, and I'm going to do 3 of those so that we can have them positioned in the nest. I'm then going to add glue to the back of each of those and glue them into the little bird's nest. I wanted to add one more natural element, so I'm going to go in and add some more little beads of hot glue in front of the eggs, and I'm going to add some Spanish moss. I like bringing in this other tone, and as I said, it's that lovely, nice, natural element, perfect for spring and Easter. So I'm just going to dab that Spanish moss into the hot glue and add a little bit more on the right-hand side there, so I can add a little bit more Spanish moss. Finally, I'm going to add hot glue around the bottom rim of the egg so that I can attach the bird piece to sit in the front. And here's a look at our finished spring egg. I love how this turned out. I think it looks very regal, and it's definitely amazing what you can do with Redesign molds and transfers. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find some of the products used in today's video on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.